She lives in a house that stands on chicken legs. You should be afraid. You should also knock. The story of Baba Yaga and the old Slavic world. Deep in the forests of Eastern Europe, in the part of the world the Slavic peoples have called home for thousands of years, there is a house. It stands in a clearing where no path leads, surrounded by a fence made of human bones, its posts topped with glowing skulls that light the way at night. The house itself does not sit still. It stands on two enormous chicken legs, and it turns, slowly, restlessly, never facing the same direction for long, so that if you are lucky enough to find it, you still have to say the right words before it will turn to let you in. Inside that house lives a woman. She is ancient beyond telling. Her nose nearly touches the ceiling when she lies down. Her teeth are iron. She travels not by any vehicle you would recognize, but inside a great mortar, rowing herself through the air with a pestle, sweeping away her tracks behind her with a broom made of birch. She eats children. Sometimes. She also, sometimes, is the only reason the hero of the story survives at all. This is Baba Yaga. And I want to tell you something before we go further into her forest. She is not a villain. She has never been a villain. She is something far older and far stranger than that word allows, and the Slavic peoples who told her story for over 1,000 years never expected you to simply be afraid of her. They expected you to be afraid of her and to knock on her door anyway, because some of the most important things you will ever need in your life are only given out by the very people who terrify you the most. Let us begin. Who is Baba Yaga? Baba Yaga belongs to the body of folklore and pre-Christian belief shared across the Slavic peoples, the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Poles, the Czechs, the Belarusians, and many others whose ancestors occupied the great forests and plains of Eastern Europe long before the written records we have of them began. Her name itself is debated by scholars to this day. Baba is a word found across many Slavic languages meaning grandmother, old woman, or sometimes simply woman in a tone that carries both respect and unease. Yaga is murkier. Some linguists connect it to old words meaning horror, illness, or anger. Others trace it to roots meaning serpent, or to a forgotten word for a kind of dangerous, untamed force in nature itself. Whatever the exact origin, by the time her stories were finally written down by folklorists in the 18th and 19th centuries, collected from villages, told by grandmothers to children around fires, passed down by people who had never written a word of it before, Baba Yaga had already existed in the oral memory of Eastern Europe for an unknown and very long span of time. She is not a goddess in the way Zeus or Inanna or Pangu are gods, ruling some specific domain of the cosmos from a temple where people brought offerings. She belongs to a different and in some ways older category of myth, the figure who lives at the edge of the human world, neither fully divine nor fully mortal, who guards the boundary between the world you know and the world you do not. She lives, the stories always insist, deep in the forest, and you must understand what the forest meant to the people who told these stories. This was not a forest the way we think of a park or a hiking trail today. This was the vast, ancient, half-mapped wilderness of pre-modern Eastern Europe, real wolves and real winters and real disappearances, the edge of the known world for any peasant child who wandered too far from the village. To go into that forest was to leave civilization. To find a house standing on chicken legs somewhere inside it was to arrive at the threshold of something even stranger than the forest itself, the boundary of the human world entirely, the place where the rules you knew no longer applied. The house on chicken legs. Let's slow down on the house itself, because it is one of the strangest and most enduring images in all of world mythology, and almost everyone who has ever heard the phrase house on chicken legs remembers it for the rest of their life. The hut, called izbushka in Russian, stands on a pair of giant bird legs, sometimes specifically chicken legs, sometimes more vaguely described as fowl legs, and it has the unsettling ability to turn on these legs like a dancer on a single pivot point, rotating in the clearing without ever quite settling. The fence around it is made of human bones, topped with skulls whose eye sockets glow with a strange light at night, serving as lanterns for a house that needs no other lamp. Some versions add a gate that locks itself with human fingers instead of a bolt, or a lock made from a jawbone, snapping shut with teeth. Why a house on legs? Scholars who study the deep roots of Slavic folklore point to something specific and very old. Structures historically used by Slavic and other northern peoples as elevated storage huts or burial structures, built on stilts or on the stumps of felled trees to keep them above the snow, above the damp ground, above the reach of animals. A tree stump with its roots still attached, viewed by torchlight or in memory across 1,000 years of retelling, does resemble something uncannily like a clawed leg gripping the earth. Some folklorists suggest Baba Yaga's hut is a folk memory of these ancient elevated storehouses for the dead, meaning that to approach her house at all was, in the oldest layer of the story, to approach something like a tomb. A threshold between the world of the living and the world of those who have already crossed over. This matters enormously for understanding who Baba Yaga actually is. She is not simply a witch who happens to live in the woods. She is a guardian of the boundary between life and death itself, and her house, restless, turning, fenced in bone, lit by skulls, is built directly on top of that boundary, refusing to settle on either side. When a hero in these stories finally finds the hut, they cannot simply walk up and knock. The hut must be told to turn. The old formula, repeated across hundreds of collected tales, goes something like this: little hut, stand with your back to the forest and your front to me. And the hut, alive in a way the story never bothers to fully explain, simply accepting that this is how the world works, turns on its chicken legs, and the door that was facing into the deep, trackless wood now faces the traveler instead. This is the first test. Not a riddle, not a fight, not a feat of strength. Simply knowing the correct way to address a structure that should not be capable of hearing you at all. The forest does not reward force. It rewards a very specific, very old kind of respect, the willingness to speak properly to a power greater than yourself rather than trying to break your way past it. The most famous story, Vasilisa the Beautiful. To understand what Baba Yaga is really for in these stories, what role she plays, what she represents, why generations of grandmothers told this story to children and considered it not a horror story but something closer to instruction, we need the most famous tale in which she appears, Vasilisa the Beautiful. Vasilisa is a young girl whose mother dies when she is small. Before dying, her mother gives her one object, a small wooden doll, and tells her a strange instruction. Keep this doll with you always. Feed it a little when you are troubled, give it a sip to drink, and ask its advice, and it will help you. Do not show it to anyone else. Then her mother dies, and Vasilisa keeps the doll secretly, feeding it scraps of her own food in the dark, telling it her troubles. Her father remarries. The new stepmother has 2 daughters of her own, and like nearly every stepmother in nearly every folk tradition on earth, this one despises the beautiful, quiet stepdaughter and works ceaselessly to destroy her, giving her the hardest chores, feeding her the least, hoping she will simply wear away into nothing. But every night, when the house is dark and the stepmother and stepsisters are asleep, Vasilisa feeds her doll and confides in it, and the doll, small, wooden, given to her by a dying mother who somehow knew exactly what her daughter would eventually need, finishes the impossible chores for her in the night. The garden is weeded by morning. The grain is sorted by dawn. The stepmother cannot understand how this happens, and her hatred only deepens. Eventually, the stepmother finds her opportunity. One night, she puts out every candle and every lamp in the house except one, and sends Vasilisa out into the dark forest to fetch fire from the only source anyone knows of nearby, the hut of Baba Yaga. This is, of course, exactly what the stepmother wants. She is not sending Vasilisa on an errand. She is sending her to be eaten. Vasilisa goes into the forest, terrified, consulting her doll the whole way, and the doll comforts her and guides her steps. She finds the hut on chicken legs, the bone fence, the glowing skulls. She knocks, the hut turns, and Baba Yaga herself answers, described in the old tales with her iron teeth, her long nose, riding in or stepping from her great mortar, smelling, the stories always say, that there is the scent of a Russian, of a living human, in her house. And here is the crucial moment. Baba Yaga does not simply attack her. She makes her an offer that is really a test disguised as hospitality. She tells Vasilisa she may stay, but only if she serves her. Baba Yaga sets her to work, spin a great basket of flax into thread by morning, sort an impossible mixture of poppy seeds from dirt by morning, prepare her dinner, clean her hut, tasks that would take any ordinary person far longer than a single night, with the unspoken understanding hanging in the air the entire time that failure means she will be eaten. Every night, Vasilisa feeds her doll in secret, and every impossible task is somehow finished by morning. Baba Yaga, returning home each day in her mortar, finds the work done and cannot understand it, but accepts it, day after day, the tension in the story stretching tighter each time. Eventually Vasilisa, trembling, dares to ask Baba Yaga questions of her own, about the strange mysterious horseman she has seen riding past the hut, a white rider at dawn, a red rider at sunrise, a black rider at nightfall. Baba Yaga answers plainly, "My bright day, my red sun, my dark night, they are my servants, and none of your business beyond that." And then Baba Yaga, in a moment that scholars of the tale find fascinating, asks Vasilisa a question of her own. How is it that you finish these impossible tasks? And Vasilisa, perhaps unwisely, perhaps because by now she trusts that honesty is safer than lying to this creature, tells her, I am helped by my mother's blessing. Baba Yaga's reaction is immediate and sharp. She tells Vasilisa to leave at once. She wants nothing to do with anyone carrying a blessing. That kind of power is not welcome under her roof. And so, instead of eating her, Baba Yaga gives Vasilisa exactly what she originally came for. She takes one of the glowing skulls from the bone fence around her house, places it on a stick, and gives it to Vasilisa to carry home as her fire. Vasilisa returns through the dark forest carrying a skull whose eyes burn with light, and arrives home to find her stepmother and stepsisters waiting, demanding to know why she took so long. She offers them the skull lantern she has carried all this way. And the eyes of the skull fix themselves on the stepmother and her daughters, and they burn. By morning, there is nothing left of them but ash. Vasilisa, having survived the forest, having survived Baba Yaga herself, returns to find she does not need to go back to the house that abused her, because the house, and the people in it who tormented her, no longer exist. What Baba Yaga actually represents. Now I want you to notice something, because it is the key to understanding her entire mythological function, not just in this story but across dozens of tales where she appears in roughly the same shape. Baba Yaga is never simply rescued from or simply defeated. She is passed through. The heroes and heroines of these stories do not slay her the way a Western hero slays a dragon. They go to her, they endure her tasks, they answer her questions correctly or incorrectly, and depending entirely on how they conduct themselves in her presence, she either destroys them or equips them with exactly what they need to return home transformed. This is why folklorists describe her using a phrase coined by the scholar Vladimir Prop, who spent his career analyzing the deep structure of Russian fairy tales. She occupies the role of the donor. Not the villain of the story, not its final obstacle, but the dangerous, ambiguous figure who tests the hero and, if the hero passes the test, provides them with a magical object or piece of knowledge that allows the actual story to resolve. The dragon at the end of the tale is defeated with a sword. But the sword, so often, was given by Baba Yaga, deep in the forest, to the only travelers who knew how to speak to her properly. This is profoundly different from how most cultures construct their forest witches and ogres. Baba Yaga is genuinely dangerous. Children in these tales really do sometimes get eaten, really do end up baked in her oven, really do disappear into the woods and never return. The danger is not theatrical. But the danger exists alongside an absolute ironclad rule of reciprocity that runs through every single tale. Those who are polite, who are diligent, who complete the tasks she sets without complaint, who answer her questions honestly but do not pry further than they are permitted to, are rewarded, often lavishly. Those who are rude, lazy, greedy, or who ask one question too many, are destroyed. She is, in other words, not chaos. She is an extremely strict, extremely old law, dressed in the most frightening possible costume so that only the genuinely worthy or the genuinely desperate would ever dare to seek her out in the first place. The goddess beneath the witch. Many scholars who study the deeper pre-Christian layers of Slavic belief argue that Baba Yaga, as we know her from these 18th and 19th century collected folktales, is a softened, narrativized descendant of something much older and much larger, a goddess of death, winter, and the threshold between the living world and the world of ancestors, a figure connected to the old Slavic understanding of the cycle of seasons and the underworld long before Christianity arrived in Eastern Europe, and pushed the old gods into the shadows of folklore, where they survived not as objects of worship but as characters in stories told to children. In this older reading, the bone fence and the glowing skulls are not random decoration meant simply to frighten. They are the literal boundary marker of the realm of the dead, and Baba Yaga's hut sits exactly on top of that boundary the way a customs post sits on a national border. You cannot get to the other side without passing through her checkpoint, and she alone decides whether you are permitted to cross, and in which direction. This also explains something that puzzles modern readers about these tales. Why does the hero so often have to go to Baba Yaga, rather than around her? Why is there no path that simply avoids her hut? Because in the oldest layer of meaning beneath these stories, there isn't one. If your path in life requires you to pass through transformation, through loss, through a genuine test of who you are when no one is rewarding you for it, there is no route around that threshold. There is only the question of how you conduct yourself when you reach it. Vasilisa does not avoid Baba Yaga. She is sent directly into her hands by a stepmother who wanted her destroyed. And she survives not through cleverness or trickery or a weapon, but through diligence, through humility, through knowing when to ask a question and when to stop asking, and through the quiet, secret companionship of something her mother gave her before dying, something she nourished faithfully in the dark when no one else believed it mattered. Why she endures. Baba Yaga has survived in Slavic culture for an extraordinarily long time, and she has not faded the way so many regional folk figures eventually do. She appears in Russian, Ukrainian, Polish, Czech, and Belarusian tales with regional variations in name and detail, but a consistent core identity across an enormous span of geography and centuries. She has been illustrated by major Russian painters. She appears in classical music, most famously in Modest Mussorgsky's pictures at an exhibition, where an entire movement is devoted to her hut on chicken legs. She continues to appear in contemporary novels, films, and games, reimagined again and again for new generations, never quite losing the particular flavor of dread and respect she has always demanded. I think she endures because she tells a truth that more comforting stories cannot tell as well. Not every gatekeeper in your life is going to be gentle with you. Not every test that determines whether you get what you need is going to feel fair, or kind, or explained to you in advance. Sometimes the only path to what you actually need, fire to bring back to a freezing house, knowledge you cannot get anywhere else, the thing that finally breaks the curse your stepmother put on your whole existence, runs directly through someone who has both the power to destroy you and the power to save you, and gives you no guarantee in advance of which one she intends to do. What the story insists on, again and again, across 1,000 years of telling, is that your conduct in that threshold space matters more than your strength, your beauty, or your luck. Vasilisa is beautiful, yes, and the story always tells us so. But beauty does not finish the flax by morning. Diligence does. Quiet, secret faithfulness to the small wooden doll her mother gave her does. The willingness to ask a respectful question and then, crucially, to stop asking, does. Baba Yaga rewards a very specific quality that has nothing to do with how impressive you look standing in front of her, and everything to do with who you actually are when you think no one is grading you for it. And maybe that is the oldest and truest thing this story has to offer, underneath all the iron teeth and the glowing skulls and the restless turning house. The forest is real. The threshold is real. Somewhere in your life, you will have to knock on a door you are afraid of, in a clearing with no path leading to it, and ask a house that should not be able to hear you to please turn around. And what happens next will depend less on whether you are strong enough to fight what's inside, and far more on whether you know how to ask properly, do the work without complaint, and recognize the moment to stop pushing your luck. Baba Yaga has been waiting in that forest for a very long time, deciding exactly that, for every traveler who has ever found her door. The boundaries she guards. So when you ask what Baba Yaga ultimately is, witch, goddess, grandmother, monster, the honest answer the old Slavic tales give you is, she is all of those, depending entirely on who is asking and how. She is the keeper of the line between the world you know and the world of the dead, between the comforts of the village and the terrors of the deep forest, between the child you were before the test and the person you become after surviving it. She does not hand out her gifts for free, and she never has. But she has never, in 1,000 years of telling, refused to give them to the ones who knock correctly, work without complaining, and know when silence is wiser than one more question. Ancient stories. Eternal truth. This has been Sera Mythology.